China is building new routes to move oil and other goods quickly to and from the country, and one of them is a 10,000 kilometre long railway link to and from Iran. But in a world still dominated by tankers and with the ongoing crisis in the Strait of Hormuz, how much does one land link move the needle?
Not much. It's a simple fact of numbers, let's say. I mean, most of the oil that transported to China, especially from Iran, right, travels on what they're called very large crude carriers, VLCCs.
All right, you might be surprised by that answer from China expert Andrea Giselli. I was, but it's kind of the key to this story. Giselli is going to help us understand Beijing's reasons for the investment and, more importantly, its preparedness for global shocks. Is China, of all the countries on the planet, the best equipped to navigate its way through this energy crisis that has rocked economies around the world?
You can say that it shows all those preparations that the Chinese have made over the decades and so on are working. Because again, the issue of energy security has long been on the agenda of different Chinese leaders. And so it's paying out. No, it's paying itself. There's no doubt about it. So I think the surprise. I mean, people knew that China was interested in energy security, diversification, and so on. But I think this crisis really brings the difference in their preparation, especially our lack of preparation, really in a sharp relief. I think this is the point. It's not just surprising Chinese policies, but really the gap that exists on this issue between us and them.
Let's delve into that. Why are they so prepared, and since when?
I mean, China's been thinking about this issue of dependence for a very long time. Dependence broadly for not just oil, dependence on anything outside for a very long time. And oil, of course, has always been at the very top of the thinking since China became a net importer in the 90s.
So they've been preparing for a very long time. But let's get back to the railway line that allows China bypass the Strait of Hormuz. Is the 10,000 kilometre long line actually a game changer? It's faster, but how much capacity does it have?
Each of these ships can more or less carry roughly between 600 and 700 thousand barrels, right? Which is a gigantic amount, right? At the same time, the typical train can move only up to 60 to 70,000, right? So just the scale of the single, unit, the single means of transportation that is used.
So we're talking roughly 10 times smaller. Realistically, can this railway ever compete with the scale and speed of tankers?
It tells us that this train alternative can only be limited. And of course, the train takes less time. But it said it's as far as I understand it, this railway is not really completely or fully operational. It's working since last year. But nonetheless, there are still some obstacles. I think about customs, crossing borders, and so far and so on. And therefore, some of the most optimistic, calculations, they show that in any case, these trains configured for long haul transportation can really rarely even exceed 100,000 barrels per route, per travel. So this to say that really to just match one of these gigantic ships, one of these gigantic VLCCs, Iran would actually need about between 25 and 35 trains, which at the moment are simply not available.
So even in a crisis, this isn't something you can just scale up overnight. Is that the real limitation here?
So this say that, of course, if the crisis Strait of Hormuz continues, China is more than interested in diversifying not just the number of its suppliers, but also the modes of transportation for oil. And of course, Iran is even more interested in ensuring the flow of oil keep on going. So it is possible that this railway link can pick up and actually end up moving a non-significant, non-trivial amount of oil. But that said, it will take time, and it cannot really match seaborne transportation nonetheless.
If it's so constrained, why invest in it at all? What's China's game here?
Well, I mean, there is no silver bullet for, to achieve energy security. Just adding one more supplier is not going to change your situation usually. Adding a bit more oil from another country is not going to change that. And the same is here, right? Just the railway alone cannot change the situation. But China can definitely, decide to import a bit more from one country. And of course, you can smoothen that in many ways, but that doesn't change the minimum friction, right? There will always be a certain amount of friction. Something can break, right, on the railway, stopping everything. And so, of course, we can imagine this railway link again picking up, but there will always be limits. It cannot substitute seaborne transportation. There's no doubt about that. It can help to supplement it, right, but not substitute.
This isn't about replacing sea routes then, it's about reinforcing them. But zooming out, does this point to something bigger? Is China simply better prepared than everyone else when it comes to logistics and supply chains?
China is definitely in a whole league of its own. I mean, beyond the specific case of transporting oil on railway, it's quite clear. I'm quite familiar with figures from, for example, from Asia. So if you compare South Korea, Japan, India, and China, this is what at least the data up to 2024 indicate. That 2025 are not available yet, but it showed that overall China has been far more successful in decreasing its reliance on Middle Eastern oil than especially South Korea and Japan.
How much of this comes down to long-term planning versus reacting to crises?
It's not just about the fuel at the pump. It's not just that, because petroleum products and other things that are produced, as for example, helium, right, is produced during the extraction of LNG. And this is critical for example, chip making, right? And of course, we saw inflation in China increasing for the first time after a very long period of deflation.
So the railway might not change the game on its own, but it does reveal something much bigger about how China thinks ahead. And it raises a couple of big questions. Is China now better prepared for a global crisis than the West? And if the next shock hits, who's actually more vulnerable? Let us know what you think in the comments. I'm Pablo Follielias. Thanks for watching.